Welcome everybody, here Brady from BGWX, and we are back for another breakdown here of the tropics. We did not break down Gabrielle, in part because I was very busy, but also because it wasn't going to affect too many people. Just ocean swells really off the coast of the U.S. East Coast and Bermuda, so with maybe some slightly gusty conditions for Bermuda, but other than that, nothing really of note other than a pretty impressive category 4 hurricane, which we did some tracking on X for that. But here's what we got going on in the tropics right now. We have Invest 94L, which is over the Caribbean islands right now, and it will be moving into the Bahamas, and we'll expect development from that. And then we also have Tropical Storm Humberto, which is just to the east of that. And that is expected to become a very powerful hurricane as well, likely. And Gabrielle is currently still here off to the east of Bermuda, well to the east of Bermuda at this point now, and will be continuing to move towards the Azores Islands and into the Iberian Peninsula. Looked like maybe once upon a time ago would be Ireland, and now it looks like the Iberian Peninsula, where Portugal and España will see some effects from that, otherwise known as Spain. So as we zoom in here, we take a look as we give a brief general breakdown what's going on. Go to the NHC page, and you can see Gabrielle out there off in the middle of the North Atlantic. And then we also have Humberto, which is a 45-mile-per-hour tropical storm, a very weak tropical storm at this point, just 1007 millibars, even though 45 miles per hour. Then we have Invest 94L, as you can see, and yes, Gabrielle is weaker. 85-mile-per-hour hurricane will become extratropical soon, but it will be very impactful, likely for the Azores Islands, and in the Iberian Peninsula will turn into a very powerful mid-latitude tropical cyclone. So if you know anybody out there, you can maybe give them a heads up. I'm sure it's already being talked about. But this is the most concern right now. It's Humberto and it's Humberto and 94L, which likely, I think it's Imelda is the I name for this year. And that will be the concern here, is that how do these two play with each other? We're possibly going to be looking at something called the Fujiwhara effect, which basically means these two are going to be interacting with each other. You can see how close these are already. I already think they're doing a little bit of song and dance, to be honest, right now. But let me take a screenshot here. Most recent, as you can see, this is where 94L is. This designated invest here, this whole thing, this large area, 94L, and this is where Humberto is. And so we're going to be watching here to see how these two interact with each other. This will continue to move to the west-northwest. This will slowly meander behind it. And then we have to see, as this continues this will eventually move north, it looks like. What is the potential interaction with these two down the line? This is very complex. This is an extremely complex forecast. I know we talk about it all the time. You hear weathermen, this is a tough forecast. Every forecast is hard. It's just a matter of how difficult is it going to be. Especially when we're talking about high impact scenarios, every forecast is difficult because depending on where you live, it can make a huge difference. And these storms are very large, and many people live in small areas, along coastlines. So it's hard to, in the grand scheme of things, the storm hitting here versus here, not saying that's exactly what's going to happen, just saying an example, storm hitting here versus here in the grand scheme of things may not be that huge of a difference in terms of the broad scheme of the Atlantic. But within the U.S., there's a huge difference if we're, talking about, say, the difference between, somewhere like, Fort Pierce, Florida getting hit versus, towards Savannah, Georgia. Like, that's a huge difference right there for some people. So, when we talk about how forecasts are difficult, that's what we mean. But eventually what we're going to be watching is how these two interact with each other. And we'll go to the Mimic here. We'll go to the PWAT. So this is just the moisture content. Also, I should note, there's going to be some significant flooding tonight into tomorrow here. You can see those PWAT levels rising here, and you can see the tropics ongoing here. Take a look at this interesting setup here. Is all the moisture, the tail end of Gabrielle, Humberto, 94L, all of this moisture here is getting pulled up from this cyclone that's coming through, this mid-latitude cyclone. Not an extremely strong one, but it is getting pulled up. And so there is this threat for tornadic activity here along the mid-Atlantic and northeast coast, and then also very heavy rainfall, flooding rainfall. So keep an eye on that tonight through tomorrow as well. But as we watch it, you can see the spin starting to increase a little bit on 94L. You can see there's a little bit. We can see the convergence, the moisture coming off of South America, helping to increase the vorticity of the system. The spin, remember, low level vorticity is what matters with the tropics, because these storms originate from the surface versus in the wintertime we look at often storms will cross the U.S. impact, and we look at those, and those are mid-latitude cyclones, meaning they're coming up from higher up in the atmosphere. These are originating from the surface, however. So we're looking at convergence off land masses here, even within some of the Caribbean islands here, and that's helping to increase the vorticity, help organize this a little bit better. I believe the friction here combined with this center of circulation, which is, I don't believe we have a closed off center of circulation yet. Otherwise, we probably would have seen this designated. Sometimes there is some back and forth that people like to go back, as we saw with Gabrielle. I really don't think the semantics mattered that much. It was a storm going off the sea. Some people absolutely lost their minds. I thought it was, you could make a case either way. In my opinion, I didn't see as big of a problem with the National Hurricane Center naming it when it did. It looked pretty close when they named it, in my opinion. So some people will think that's a really hot take, and that, is the end or be all, whatever, for hurricane thoughts or whatever, enthusiast or whatever you want to call people online. They think it's the end or be all, and you gotta debate it until you prove you're right, which I don't understand that point of view either. But as we can see, this is the closest one to the U.S. This is the one behind it. And we have to watch closely how these two interact with each other. But you can see they are organizing. You can see that Humberto to the east, that spin becoming stronger, even though I think it's still lacking some conditions in the short term, the very short term. The visible spin in the organization is very present, and I think that this is poised either tomorrow or the next day to eventually intensify. In the short term, I'm not so sure about intensification, about this thing taking off. Some slow intensification, certainly likely, I would say, into the morning. It is certainly possible into the midday, but I think it's going to have to wait until probably likely D-max tomorrow night and the next day for the best period, so it can get a little bit more separation from 94L, because 94L is going to continue to move, as we mentioned, is going to continue move towards the Bahamas, as you can see currently crossing the island. So I wouldn't expect any development likely quite yet, given the land interaction it's still dealing with. Even though you could argue the land interaction is helping it organized, it's still not, we're seeing the specifications needed for a tropical cyclone designation quite yet. And we'll see this move closer to the Bahamas, and I think that's when we'll see this become a tropical storm likely. And as you can see, Gabrielle way out here in the Atlantic, losing its potency as for its tropical origins. So we take a look at guidance a little bit. We'll use the Euro AI here, take a look, and as you can see, slowly organizing and strengthening a little bit, which I would say is not unexpected, slowly. But then I think we really start to see this thing take off more so as we head closer into this weekend. As you can see, the spin starts to organize with 94L, and you can see that that vorticity off of South America, off of the islands, the land interaction there, helps start to organize the system. And then this becomes the question here. We won't go out too much farther here. Is how do these two interact? How strong is this too? Does it stay over the islands? Does it stay just east of the Bahamas? How large does the system become too? There is certainly going to be impacts. Very heavy rainfall, probably. Flooding could be a huge concern for some of these places, especially on the Dominican Republic. Across Hispaniola, I would say there's huge concern across the entire island. Puerto Rico, I would say there's some concern there for flooding as well. And then in behind it, how close does Humberto get to this system as well? So this is where we start to look at the Fujiwhara effect. These two interact. Imagine it's a little bit like they got to do the tango a little bit. Imagine two dancers, right? They're gonna flow off of each other. There's gonna be different interactions that can possibly take place, different scenarios and how they interact. How close do they come to each other when they interact? Does one absorb the other? Oftentimes we can see the strongest one get absorbed by the other depending on how close they tango, so to say. Sometimes they bounce off of each other. Sometimes they spin, then bounce off of each other. So what you see on guidance right now, I highly advise to get away from the exact specifics, because this is not the time we're talking about two storms very close to each other. So I want us all to keep that in mind. And then the question obviously becomes, how strong is this? How close this is to the coast? Because that could have significant impacts for the U.S. Then obviously we have to keep an eye. Florida, Georgia, South Carolina, North Carolina, even into the Mid-Atlantic here. Just in the meantime, I'm not willing. There's not enough evidence for me to go much farther north than that right now, as that could be too much farther. But another scenario you got to keep an eye on, which we've seen too, is this storm continues to move further north, but then this slows down, pulls Humberto to the north here, and slides Humberto potentially further north into somewhere like here. And even if it's not a fully tropical storm, or if it's more of a subtropical system, that could be a huge concern for potential impact. So we'll have to keep an eye on that potential as well, because so that's why really anywhere along the East Coast, I would say from southern New England to Florida, but in particular the southeast U.S., I think, is the most immediate concern, by far, rather than any other places. Should be closely monitoring the tropics this week and how this plays out. There could be significant impacts from significant impacts to potentially even life-threatening, depending on how things play out. So we have to keep a close eye, and I don't want to alarm in any means. Just keep an eye. I think the tone says itself. I'm just breaking down what it is and what you all should be taking a look at. I try not to play the part of how exactly you should prepare, but I do prefer safety for anybody that does listen. So again, ultimately everybody's going to do what they're going to do, so I don't really have complete control of that. But if I can help maybe just a little bit, I'm not going to try not to deny myself that opportunity. Not that I have the biggest platform compared to others, but so we have to keep an eye on how these two interact closely, because this will play a significant role for U.S. impacts. And then also if this bounces off and then slides off, then Bermuda's at store for a significant storm, and there's increasing confidence that Humberto is going to be a major hurricane. There's a lot of evidence to support that. The upper level environment is going to be very favorable. There's going to be an upper level anticyclone that forms, and for both of these systems to kind of sit in. So so I wouldn't be surprised. It wouldn't shock me, honestly, if we were to get two major hurricanes out of this. It really wouldn't surprise me all that much. You take a look at see where these two storms are sitting. We have this upper level anticyclone, and then we also have this jet streak to the north here, which could potentially help enhance this a little bit. And then we do also have, on the other side of this upper level anticyclone, we do have not too far, not the same exact setup as Gabrielle, but we do, as you can see, have the wind shear here present, lighter wind shear on this on the east side of the upper level anticyclone that could help spin the top faster, at least on Humberto on this side. And then you also have the upper level divergence to the north here, well to the north, this jet streak, as you can see, within this upper level anticyclone, and we're going to have multiple systems within this. So there's going to be a good, with lower wind shear, so there's going to be a good opportunity for both of these storms to potentially intensify. Question is how it's strong. If you had to put a gun to my head, not to alarm anybody, but just a phrase, I would say that 94L, I think, has a decent shot to become at least a hurricane or a strong tropical storm at least. And I would say that Humberto, I think, has a good shot to become at least a strong to major hurricane. And that is in the forecast explicitly from the National Hurricane Center. We can use their cone as an example because they tend to be pretty good in terms of accuracy and within the cone, the entire cone. So I'll take the track out, the center track, and that is the cone that they're kind of going with for Humberto at least, and 94L will be to the left of that, and this could really change a lot depending on how these two interact with each other. So hopefully that breaks things down, gives you all a little bit of a breakdown. We'll try to stay consistent with these videos upcoming here, as there's a lot going on now in the tropics. Again, this is our system. Keep an eye on an isolated tornado threat tomorrow, today, whatever, and potential flooding rains. And then we'll also have to keep an eye on the tropics, obviously, which was the topic of this video. And then Gabrielle, keep an eye on the Azores Islands into the Iberian Peninsula. That is the major topics for the tropics going on right now. So that's what we got going on. I hope you all have a great day, have a great night whenever you're watching this. And until next time, peace out.